Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Maps Ask Me Anything session. I just want to do a triple check, and people on the panel just give me a thumbs up that you can hear me and we're good. All right, awesome. So this is where you can ask us anything about Mapbox Maps, and we particularly welcome any questions you might have about the new Maps features you just heard about in the keynote session from Will White and some of our customers. Things like internationalization, the core styles redesigns, globe view, studio folders. And if you did hang around to the end, you may have also heard about the Flutter plugin that is coming soon. But you can ask anything. Before we get started, I do want to introduce our very, I'm going to call them very brave panel of Mapboxers who agreed to attempt to answer any question you may have about maps. And then team, if you could just give a wave when I introduce you, that'll work. So first we have Matthew Anthony, Senior Product Manager for Mapbox GLJS and Mapbox Studio. We also have Osa Forcell, who is a Senior Product Manager of Maps. Then we also have Varun Kalyan, a Senior Product Manager of Maps as well. We have Konstantin Kafer, who is a Principal Software Engineer here at Mapbox. And I saw on his profile, LinkedIn profile, has been here for a very long time. So Konstantin's got a lot of experience. And then I'm Greg Banneker. I'll be hosting this session. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for our map service. And then finally, we do also have Erica Ackley here, who's a demand generation specialist. And she's going to help us just make sure logistically everything works out well. So just a couple other things. Some brief logistics before we do get into any questions. This is an Ask Me Anything session, so it's really going to rely on you. So please don't hesitate to ask us the questions you have. We do have a full hour. If we need it, we'll take it. If we wrap up early, you can head to another one of our scheduled sessions. If you do have a question and you want to ask it live, we really encourage that. Just raise your hand. You can see in the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be a reactions button. You can click the reactions button, and then there's a little button there that says raise hand. So just do that, and then you can turn on your video, unmute yourself, and ask your question. If you don't want to ask live, we also completely understand that, and you can just type your question into the chat. So if you hit chat, you can type it over on the right-hand side. So with that, I do want to officially open up our Maps Ask Me Anything session to any questions you have. And I do see we already have a hand. So Max, why don't you go for it?
Yep, thanks very much. So we've migrated away from Google Maps quite a while ago, which I was quite happy about, and migrated to having Mapbox as a base layer for both satellite and kind of standard maps. One kind of motivation for moving away from Google Maps was at that point that you, I think, got the updated satellite imagery from Digital Globe. But now a big issue is for us at the moment that when you zoom in closer in cities or all over the place in the UK specifically, the resolution of the aerial imagery isn't as competitive as it is with Google Maps. So I've asked the question in the main session as well and got sort of a relatively generic answer there. But for us, it's quite important to know if there are any timelines or plans to improve the resolution on the lower zoom levels through aerial imagery, because satellite imagery, I think, is not really feasible for that. And what those are specifically. Otherwise, I'm getting pressure from the business to move to Google Maps, which I don't want to. So that would be my question.
Yeah, I guess I can take this one. I saw your question in the main channel. Thanks a lot for that. I'm afraid I cannot give you exact dates, so I'm going to give you an expanded generic answer, and hopefully we can chat about it a little bit later. But we are actually right now in the process of road mapping our 2023 investments, and increased and improved imagery is definitely there, and it will be prioritized for next year. The exact release date and the scope of that is still a little bit a question mark for us, because we're still in the planning phase. But this also means that this is a really good spot for you to get in direct contact with us and send your requirements and the specific areas of worry, so we can put those on the requirement list as well. So unfortunately, not able to tell you an exact date when you're going to get these improvements, but it's definitely on the investment list. We are also acknowledged, or we have already acknowledged this internally. So I would hope that maybe we can reach out to you after this session and get chatting and start getting those feedbacks and information from you to make sure that your worries are addressed.
Yeah, sure. Happy for you to reach out to me. I guess you have my details. Otherwise, however, we're gonna do that. That's great. Thanks.
And Max, I did pass your question directly on to Alistair, who is a product manager for the aerial imagery that we have. And he was excited that you asked. So I echo what Osa said, but it's been passed along for sure.
Perfect. Thanks, great.
Connor, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I don't need a long preamble. I've been using Mapbox for 10 years now. So I was just wondering on your future product updates, one of your original Mapbox using TileMill allowed for layer blending. I was wondering if that's going to ever come to the new Mapbox Studio as a future enhancement.
I can take that one. Yeah, hey Connor. Blending modes, and I think just like giving more compelling visual styling controls is a common feature request we get in Studio. It's in our backlog. As Osa said, we're in the midst of planning right now, so we're sort of deciding priorities within Studio. So no like clear dates, but it's definitely something that we've heard a lot from customers.
If I can add some fire under you, some of your competitors using your spec has already rolled it out a few years ago, and it's prevalent in their online products now using Mapbox vector tile specs. So it'd be great if it could happen. I know your cartographer there, Johnny Walker, would probably really like it too. So
yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, we should talk. I'd love to get a little bit more, hear more of the fire from you.
Yeah, I use it outside of Mapbox constantly in QGIS or ArcPro or whatever. So it would be great to have kind of combine that with our maps can look our maps in-house would look the same as they do online. I can incorporate those styling techniques. It'd be awesome. Please, it's high on my list. It'd be awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Connor. And yeah, we definitely, this is an Ask Me Anything session, but we're also here to get your feedback, which Max and Connor you already have. So we really appreciate that. And anyone else, please feel free to chime in. I don't see any current questions in the chat. However, there were some questions in the Q&A that I want to make sure we also address. So Matthew, we started on Studio. So why don't we stay there for a minute and not just blending, but what is the future of Studio for 2023, generally speaking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll take a step back and sort of talk about what we just released and where our focus has been. We've heard a lot of feedback from customers that organizing and managing files has been a pain point, and we've done a really good job with the style editor, and there's lots more to do. But I think, just taking a pause and focusing on how we manage our files has been a priority. So addressing that through folders, the change is also going to involve just like a redesign of the Studio homepage and just making it easier to understand the link between styles and its related resources. And then, another pain point we're addressing is being able to recover deleted files by yourself without having to come through us. That's been some of the more immediate focus on the team. Where we're looking at next is Studio works really well for our developer community, our cartographer community, but there is a missing opportunity, or just there's a lot we can do for the wider base beyond that in terms of both balancing advanced styling needs, but also making it easy to get set up quickly and quickly style your base map for specific use cases. So yeah, as we get into 2023 planning, one thing we're thinking about is how can we make Studio work for more people trying to build a map?
I do want to, well, RJ, go ahead.
Hey, you said ask me anything, and I don't know if this is exactly related to your team doing the development work, but one thing that surprised me about 2 or 3 months ago was that Mapbox started requiring a credit card to set up accounts. And I work in the education space, and I literally like showed up to give a workshop to share my enthusiasm for Mapbox to 30 young undergraduates, and like everybody got hit. And actually only like 50% of people got hit with the request for a credit card. And I was like mortified, like, how am I going to do this? And so I ended up like sharing all my logins, and it was kind of horrible. I had sent an email saying like, is there a way you can have some sort of educational process where, I mean, those of us in the education space would love to have 5,000 views per month, but like we will never reach 5,000 views per month. So like the odds of needing a credit card, I understand why you would want that for your new customers, but can you consider a way for those who want to learn Mapbox don't need to commit with their credit card? It's kind of a large cliff for somebody who's just getting started.
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, thanks for the question, RJ. Definitely, I think Mapbox always prides itself in being a really easy platform to quickly, create a sandbox environment and learn from. And we want to keep it that way. So I think part of this change was to mostly like a fraud prevention mechanism, not really anything else. So I think any channels like education where we're seeing people drop off, we should address it. So yeah, that's really good feedback. We'll take it back to the team and figure out the right way to sort of channel education in.
Yeah, and RJ, actually, Erica and myself work fairly closely with one of the people here who's working on the credit card requirement and fraud management. So I'll just echo what Matthew said. We can take that back for sure. And I also do want to say that like our education customers and students is a topic that we discuss fairly frequently in terms of like how we would like to handle. I'm going to ask this one if we have an answer. I noticed most documentation relevant to Swift UI were taken out from the docs.mapbox.com, so out from the documentation site. Is there any reason why? And does anyone here know that answer?
Yeah, I think the answer is that no one here right now knows it, but I'm just in the process of trying to get an answer from the relevant team, and I'll bring it up on this session immediately when I get someone to get back to me.
Hey, Mapbox team, from Luke, was curious if there are any plans for the ability to add .gltf and .glb files directly into Mapbox Studio.
Hey, Luke, thanks for the question. No plans right now, but we will definitely need to do a little bit more discovery into that request. Yeah, so no, yeah, nothing for you right now.
And Luke, feel free if you wanted to type in maybe, something that you're trying to accomplish just to maybe help kickstart the discovery phase. And then I'll go to Ali. I'm looking for a tutorial to show me how I can move a facility and actively change the heat map. Imagine there is a facility with a heat map, like 5-minute distance heat map. I don't know if is the team clear on what's being asked here?
Yeah, maybe I can take that. So if I understand, the question is that you're having dynamic data and you want to have the data reflected in the heat map. And what a heat map is basically a visualization of a lot of point data that gets sort of like blurred out into the distance. So if there are more points in a given area, the heat in that area will be higher. And heat maps don't necessarily display distance. So I think in order to give you a more concrete answer, you probably have to follow up a little bit on what you're exactly trying to accomplish.
Ali, let us know if that helped or if you need any more clarification. Phil, very interesting question. All right, we got the questions rolling in now, so we're just going to keep going. Phil, correct Phil if he's wrong, but Mapbox doesn't currently support Apple Watch, right? And if we don't, why not? As it's a huge opportunity.
I can take that one, actually. I might have some insight on that. So all the apps that go through the Apple Watch that are native to Apple usually would go with Apple Maps, right? Because it's included in their SDK. But that's a great question, because like we do have a little bit of presence in the wearable space, but it's just not as big in North America. So that might be the reason why you might not see Mapbox as present in North America. But I think we have companies in Asia Pacific that do use us for their fitness applications and needs. Example, Coros, Joyrun, etc. But I think this is a great piece of feedback that we can take it up with our end customers to probably develop something to show like Mapbox maps. Great question, though. I mean, that's a huge opportunity space.
All right. Can anyone on the panel provide more information on the upcoming 3D style updates, specifically the option to model real-time lighting and shadows? Will these shadows be for buildings and terrain?
Yeah, so the new 3D style, it's gonna look pretty amazing once it comes in, but the shadows will be real-time shadows laying from all of the 3D objects available in the scene, so won't be just isolated to individual buildings or such. Yeah, I wonder if I answered all of that question, but yeah, the shadows will be real-time rendered shadows, so you will see shadows where shadows should land depending on where the light is coming from, so you can have this kind of beautiful kind of realistic lighting situations going on.
Thank you, Osa. So, yeah, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, but I do want to address that you asked. So I have created a data set with multiple polygons, but they appear simplified on the style. I think it's because the data set contains a small number of features that are geographically far away from each other. Other than using Tippecanoe, what can I do?
Hey, so this depends a little bit on how you're adding the data to the Mapbox map. If you have only a few polygons, for example, using GeoJSON would be a good option. And what Mapbox.gl does internally is it takes the GeoJSON file and splits it up into vector tiles under the hood using default configurations. And that means that some of the features might be dropped from those vector tiles because of performance reasons. And if you need to control how exactly the geometry gets simplified, then there are some tweaks that you can make in to GeoJSON on the client side to control like how much it gets simplified. But if you have more complex use cases, then using MTS and specifying like how many features are getting dropped, how they're getting merged, and so on would be the option here.
Okay, thank you, Konstantin. And definitely let us know if you feel like you're getting the answer you need. Silence, I suppose, is acceptance, or say thank you. But if not, feel free to follow up in the chat and we'll definitely get to it. There is many more questions. I did just want to, real quick, RJ, I can't tell if you have a hand up. It does seem a little faded, but if you do have a question, just let me know. And if not, I'm going to move to Anthony.
Yeah, actually, what's funny is it's really related to the last one. So if I could
let's do it.
it's sort of the same as we were talking about the simplification, and I have used the MT API to sort of force a zoom level, but I've had a similar. I don't know if anybody else in chat like has ever seen it just like really wrong. Like it's like zoom to this layer and it like just takes you to the whole world or something. You're like, what? So I'm just wondering, like, if you can use the MT to like, you know, force a certain zoom level, but it seems like that would be relatively easy to surface in the UI for when things just seems like I had a data set that was, you know, I mean, literally like the features were 20 feet long. It's like the side of a building kind of thing. Like everything is within 4 city blocks of each other. And I just couldn't get it to render at like zoom levels above 18 or something. So I just wonder if there's a way, if you've thought about a way to kind of mature that feature from an API to a user-facing selection.
Yeah, so if you're having trouble getting those features rendered at higher zoom levels, that might point to potentially a bug in the source data or a bug in the MTS processing pipeline. And in order for us to debug this, it might be useful to reach out to support to tell them about this so that we can triage this internally and see what might be going wrong here with the data processing.
Thanks.
All right. Let's try this one out from Anthony. So Anthony would love to hear anything about weather viz. What's Mapbox's philosophy around how developers should approach this? Does Mapbox see this as a productized thing it wants to make part of our offering, or should devs focus efforts on custom layering solutions? This is about weather viz. Do we have any insight on the panel?
This would have been a great question for Alistair.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Our weather expert is not in the room.
So I'm going to, Anthony, I'm going to make sure that one gets to Alistair, who I mentioned earlier was also most suited to answer the satellite imagery question. So we'll make sure that he gets this and we can follow up.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Tonfunmi asked, I'm looking for a tutorial where I can make markers clickable to load new screens within the app. Say when users click a locked icon, the app takes me to an upgrade to a pro screen. The app is on iOS. I'll pose this to the group. I can also ask Chris Wong, who you saw in the developer section of the keynote, but I'll ask the group, do you happen to know if there's a tutorial for this?
I'm not sure whether there's a tutorial on the website, although I'm fairly certain there is. What you're looking for here is an API called query rendered features, which allows you to attach feature handling to any place where the user taps on the map. So what you're doing is, if the user taps on the marker, then you basically query, okay, tell me what's at this particular location on the map, and then Mapbox will tell you, okay, this is this type of POI or this type of street and so on. And then in your callback, you can like do whatever you want with that information. For example, take the user to a pro screen. Yeah.
This is Chris, developer evangelist. We actually just covered the very basics of query rendered features in our webinar from last week, getting started with GLJS. So I'll drop a link in the chat for that if you want to just see how it works very easily.
You snuck in on me, Chris. Welcome.
I'm very sneaky.
Are you hanging out for a few minutes, Chris?
Yeah, I'm in here.
Okay. Erica, why don't you can spotlight Chris too. All right. Okay, let's move on. I did want to acknowledge, Faizan, I see your question, and you were also asking this question in the main Q&A for the keynote session. I don't have an answer for your question. I don't know if the panel here does, but I do know that it's been taken back by my boss, actually. So we're going to try and figure out what's going on and get back to you. So I'll move on to Duo. we want to add a layer about US states with different colors. But when I import the data into Mapbox and then use the HTML build button to control the layer, I find that the layer can be eliminated, but the background created by the new layer will come back instead of the original map. Does anyone have insight on this?
I think we can probably only speculate on what might be going on here. What could be the case here is that the data contains more data than just the US states. And so what you're seeing around is sort of like the remaining data in the data set that you imported, but that's just speculation. I think it's, yeah, not sure I can help you here without more detail on this.
All right, thanks, Konstantin. And Duo, if you do have more detail, I can scroll down and get to it a little later in the session.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Wayne asked, when GeoJSON objects contain 100,000 plus points and many properties, what are the top tips for performance tuning?
That's a good question. I think if you arrive in a situation where you have 100,000 or more objects, then considering moving to vector tiles is the way to go here. GeoJSON fundamentally has the problem that all of the data, like for all of the world, is encoded in that vector, in that GeoJSON file. And so parsing it will always take some time, especially if there are many properties. And this is, so if you're talking about the browser, it's already fairly fast there, but there's really no way around to get to parsing everything due to the nature of the file format. Whereas with vector tiles, you can pre-process the data and then slice it up into these individual vector tiles. So you just load the data for that particular location you're looking at. The choice that you have to make here is how you simplify the data if you have a lot of the data. For example, if you want to show 100,000 points for the whole world, that's probably possible with vector tiles, but a better experience for your users might be to consider using something like clustering or heat maps so that the visuals are not overwhelming. But yeah, my recommendation here would be to use vector tiles for this.
Thanks for that. I've looked into that, so I'll continue looking into that.
Cool. This one's from Luke, and also I'm going to ask you first if you know for the new 3D style updates, will the rendered shadows be applicable for 3D extruded terrain? And will the shadows adjust per the exaggeration level?
Yeah, so not in the initial beta release, it will not be, but we are considering it for the future roadmap going forward. So first initial release, not immediately.
And then let's stick with you. Also, do you have any, or do we have any plans to update Mapbox SDK for Unity? Current version 2.1.1 is old. There's some issues, and it's not compatible with the new Unity version.
Yeah, so this is a question we've been discussing, I think, today. I heard discussion about it. So we do not have active development around the Unity SDK. But we are considering making some updates to it so that it continues being usable to customers. But as of right now, no committed dates or releases coming up.
And Jose had sort of a similar question. So Jose, I think that probably addresses your question as well. Matthew Orchard asks, the docs recommend using SDF encoded images. Are there any Mapbox tools for generating SDFs with correct conventions?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question. you're right in pointing out that there are documentation about these SDF images, but it's not something that we focused on in the past couple of years. And this is also why there aren't any tools in existence that generate those SDF icons for you. All of the code that's necessary to generate them is technically out there on GitHub and it's open source, but yeah, it requires some cobbling together of different repositories to accomplish that at the moment. Generating SDFs handling icon generation is something that's something that we're currently looking at. So yeah, I'll take that down for our discussions, that this is something that people are using and struggling with. Thanks.
Thank you. Could we also maybe see like an update to the documentation to at least list what the conventions that Mapbox's uses are in terms of like if higher values are inside or out, and what to be doing with the alpha channel?
Yeah.
Cool, that'd be great. Thanks.
Is there any plan to extend the APIs? I'd like to retrieve a list of all styles in my account via API. I'd also like to install SVG-based icons via API. And, does this already exist? That's from Peter.
So there is an endpoint right now you can use to fetch all the styles in your account. So I'm not sure. Yeah, if you look for the list styles in our styles API documentation, that does exist. Installing SVG-based icons via API. Yeah, Constantine, I don't think this is.
Yeah, this is also something that exists in the API. If you go to docs.mapbox.com/API/maps/styles, I'll post that link to the chat. In the right-hand column, you can see the various things that you can do with the Maps API, and adding new images to the sprite is something that you can do here. And this allows you to add SVGs as icons to your style.
All right. Moving along, and I want to say I really appreciate all the questions coming in. This is awesome. This is exactly what this session was designed for. So Ted asked, is it possible to get Mercator coordinates from screen coordinates in any way? Currently, you can only get Mercator coordinates from long lat, but it would be great to have the Mercator coordinate underneath the mouse cursor.
That's a good question. I agree with you that it sounds like this should be possible. I have to look at the documentation to find out whether that exists. We definitely have that code internally, and I'll have a look at the API, and then if that's not the case, then I'll add a note about exposing that call so that developers can use that too without having to rewrite that functionality. Might also be useful to add a note here about what particular platform you're talking about, whether that's GLJS, the Maps SDK for iOS or Android.
Awesome. Thank you, Constantine.
I was going to chime in there. Like there's project and unproject are available on the map object. So that should be enough to get you, if you already have the access to the method that can convert lat long into Mercator coordinates, all you need to do is get the lat long for wherever they clicked, which you can get from, when they click, you can get that event with the coordinates.
All right. John asked, and John's fairly new to Mapbox, so welcome. John, we're happy to have you. Our lab is considering using Mapbox to render a 3D map style display in their cockpit in a real-time flight simulation environment for an eVTOL, which is a slow mover air taxi type vehicle. Do we have any suggestions on a Mapbox development approach? For example, use Mapbox Unity example, or Mapbox GLJS app, or what? Do we have a suggestion?
Yeah, I guess I can take this one. It will really depend on the kind of hardware and operating system environment that you have going on in the in your setup. So depending on air taxi type vehicle. So I'm assuming this is a onboard map within the vehicle that is moving in the air. So we have options. So we have an embedded SDK that our automotive customers use. So for kind of like really specific high performance use cases, we provide an option for that. Of course, if you would be providing your user experience on an Android-based system, so you could use or our Android SDK for that as well. I probably wouldn't recommend the Unity SDK for this specifically, as was mentioned already in the session. It's not really actively improved and developed from our part as of now, so it might not be the optimal solution for production in this case. But if you get back to us on the specific hardware operating system configuration you're thinking of, so we can think about the performance implications and also the requirements that you have for this setup, because I have to say a slow-moving air taxi type vehicle is, I don't think we have that in our portfolio yet. So really interested in how that would actually work in real life.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that as well. I'm just thinking about, I know for our navigation, we have like a cyclist profile or a driver profile. We would need an air profile.
Yeah,
okay.
Air routing. That's going to be interesting.
So he asked a question. I'm going to throw it out there, but I know that this team is not directly involved in managing our fleet management solution. So if it's just a hard no, let's move on. Just let me know. But Kim asked, I noticed that fleet management solution has been released recently. Do you know, or are you able to talk about how the service is going to be provided?
Yeah, so I'm afraid we are from the map side of the organization. So this fleet management is a little bit of a out of our scope exactly, but you can reach out to the logistics team. So if you go to the fleet management site on our website, there is a contact form there where you can reach out to the people. So the technical account managers there can help you get access to it and can also give you a demo of how it actually works and how it could be integrated with your logistics systems on your side. So that's going to be the best bet for you.
And I hate to encourage you to leave our amazing session, but there is currently a navigation and logistics Ask Me Anything session happening right now. If you wanted to hop into that, there's about 15 minutes left for that one, which you could maybe slide in there and ask this question. All right, next one. Simple but important question. Is there a way to rename tile sets in Mapbox Studio without replacing them?
Yeah, I have a simple but frustrating answer. Not today. With MTS tile sets, you can do it via the API, but there isn't an easy way in Studio to do this. But yeah, this is some feedback we've gotten, and we have a MTS uploader in Studio beta that we're working on that should, it's still pretty in its early stages, but we're starting to incorporate features like renaming and adjusting zoom extents. So it's something that's top of mind for us. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. All right, I'm going to keep rolling because we are getting to 15 minutes and there are still some questions to get through. So I wanted to ask about the filtering layers for vector tiles by a country or countries or a custom area. We want to create a payment subscription system where the user will only pay for the relevant data for them. They have global coverage of Mapbox vector tile sets. Do you think it's possible to be done solely with Mapbox, or should we go with other means like GeoServer or PostGIS?
Yeah, good question. So that depends on how your data is set up. So one conceivable way is to have a separate layer or a separate tile set for each country that you're offering. And then you can add only the relevant tile set to the map that the customer paid for. If you have all of the data, all of your custom data in one app, in one tile set, then what you could, for example, do is limit how far a user can pan. For example, restricting that a user can't pan to a certain country that they haven't paid for, or if they pan to that country, they're getting zoomed out, so they're only seeing like the world view of the entire world. If you're talking about Mapbox data rather than your own data, like the Mapbox base map, then I'd recommend a similar approach where you can restrict the locations that a user can zoom to or pan to in your app.
So, Constantine, I'm going to skip a couple questions, but get back to them just because this seems somewhat relevant. Dave asked, I think that's just some background noise. Okay, I generate my own vector tiles with PostGIS. The same 1/4 or same quarter of data is changing rapidly by user. Wouldn't regenerate the whole tile set because of this. I don't know if I'm reading that exactly right, but the data structure is the same, so I should duplicate my style layers for having more vector tile sources. It's not good for the performance. Is there any other way to do this?
Dave, I'm not sure I fully understand. Could you please clarify that a little bit?
So yeah, well, Dave, feel free to type into the chat, maybe to clarify a little bit. And if you are going to do that while we wait, Faison asked, maybe I'll send this to you, Osa, but this is also about navigation. Can we add Mapbox navigation as a dynamic feature module in Android to reduce the app size?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what specific use case or the context of this, but you do need to have both modules where you're building your application if you want to have both of them. But you do not have to have the Nav SDK there just to render a map view. So maybe if you could send us a follow-up question with the exact use case that you have and the exact concern that you have. Is it about load times or memory usage or whatever it is? So if we could get a little bit more context, I think we could help you a little bit more.
All right, and I am sticking with you, Osa, here. So Mapbox is planning to release an official plugin for Flutter, but it's just for the mobile SDK, so for iOS and Android. What are the plans for providing web support as well?
Yeah, so also to clarify, we are not launching yet a GA version of this plugin. We are launching a beta version that's able for testing and trying out, and we would love to get some feedback on that and contributions maybe from the community. And right now we only have the iOS and Android support for that specific plugin. And then depending on how that beta goes and what the feedback is from the community, we can start thinking about introducing desktop and web support as well. So right now we don't have those on the roadmap and they are not under development, but depending on the outcome of the beta testing and feedback from the community, we'll definitely consider those, because obviously Flutter is a cross-platform environment, and it's naturally beneficial for the developers to be able to build their applications on all of the platforms that Flutter supports.
And are there any plans for React Native support?
Well, not immediately under works, but it's not something that we are, counting out either, but not right now.
Okay, I'm going to move to Russ's question. We love the new 3D maps. How are you going to be creating those landmarks? Could that be opened up to 3D art, to a 3D artist to contribute to the major landmarks?
Yeah, this is, sorry, I'm going to keep talking here, like 3 in a row, must be my day. But we are going to be modeling these landmarks ourselves to create very distinct Mapbox style. We currently don't have a setup in place where we would allow contributions from the community, but that's again something that if the feedback is strong, that people would like to contribute to that, I think we're not opposing to the idea. So I can put your message and forward it to the 3D team who are developing these models, and let's see what they think. But right now we are doing a lot of the work internally with our own kind of like small in-house design studio.
All right, so thank you. Also, I will give you a break, I think, before there are definitely more 3D questions, but for the group, how can we download a vector raster tile set in order to attach it locally?
Hey, so if you want to download tiles or data to be available offline in your app, the SDKs support a offline functionality where you can create offline regions. And the way you can do this is by specifying the geographic area that you want to download as a polygon, and then the Mapbox SDK downloads that data locally so that it's available in case the user goes offline. That functionality is available for the iOS and the Android SDK, but it's not available for the GLJS, for the web version.
All right, thank you, Konstantin. This next one from Vera, I'm going to say I don't know if this team can answer, but what is the maximum number of locations per second that can be converted through geocoding service? So address to lat long or vice versa, and can the limit be increased?
Well, there is a Ask Me Anything search session going on at the same time, Vera. So you still have 7 minutes. So if you leave us for a moment, you can join that search session and ask them that question, because yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we have the answer here. Really
something that applies to all Mapbox API services is specific rate limits. And those rate limits are listed on the documentation pages. So you can go there and see how many requests per, I think it's usually per minute, you can do. Also, each individual request usually has a HTTP header in it in the response that tells you how much requests you have left in that particular minute. If you have a use case for a higher rate limit, then you can also reach out to support to get that increased.
All right. Thank you, Konstantin. And since we are coming up against time, I'm going to say, why don't we do 3 more questions? And I've got 2 currently lined up. So basically, race to get one more in. But here we go. In my last project, I tried to display a 3D model using the ifc.js library. Unfortunately, when I used 3D terrain and 3D models simultaneously, the 3D model hid automatically at the time the 3D terrain was displayed. Do you have any advice on how I can resolve this issue?
I think I can take a crack at that. I think for now, that's not part of the roadmap, but I think this is an issue that we are looking into. And as soon as the 3D roadmap develops further and further, we definitely would love to address this in the future. I don't have any hard dates on this, but definitely will be part of our future roadmap.
Awesome. Thank you, Varun.
Yeah.
For the team, has Mapbox considered the ability to set tile set level permissions for access tokens? When you have many clients, each of which has their own private data, it's often not acceptable to have them in the same Mapbox account. Creating one account per client is also not ideal since it involves uploading the same common tile sets multiple times. Do you have any thoughts on that, Matthew?
I know this has come in from a few key customers, so it's not the first time I'm hearing it. I think this is one of those candidates we take into planning next year. So yeah, this is some like a common theme we've heard from customers, and TBD if it's going to make it to next year's roadmap.
All right, thank you. Okay, you know what I said? We were only going to do one more, but here we go. We'll do a couple more. Is there any plans to reduce Mapbox GLJS size, maybe by tree shaking or changing the target output to a newer version of JS?
Yeah, we're constantly looking at the size of the GLJS library because we know that it's important to have a small library for websites to load fast. And whenever we introduce a new feature, we look at how that affects the binary size of the library that you have to download. And we try everything to make sure that there's as little as possible impact to the binary size. You're specifically asking about tree shaking and changing the output language version. And that's also something that we're doing. So we already run tree shaking on the output. I think we're already targeting a fairly modern version of GLJS with Mapbox GLJS v2, which dropped support for Internet Explorer 11. So we can now finally do that. But the fact that Mapbox GLJS is a library that supports all kinds of different use cases means that we have to include a lot of different features. Something that that you're asking maybe is about like maybe we could remove some features for specific use cases, and yeah, that's certainly something that we could look at, and yeah, that'll take back to the team.
All right, 1 minute. So Felix, you get the last one. Some of our users are creating and editing their own roads. Currently, they get the roads as a flat GeoJSON from our servers. How should we go about unifying these with the roads layers provided by Mapbox? Should we set up our own tile server that stream the whole world as a source, or go with Mapbox tile sets? We got to go out on a bang here, team. All right. Seems like you might have stumped us.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I don't think I have an easy answer to that. There are a bunch of things to consider here. The Mapbox data set that we provide is constantly changing. So one problem that you might be running into when combining your own roads data with Mapbox roads data is that the Mapbox roads data that you're replacing changed underneath the roads data that you have if they're not in sync. Yeah, I don't think I can give a short answer at this point. Sorry about that.
So Felix, we can definitely follow up and make sure that this gets answered for you. So we are at just 1 minute left. I first wanted to thank everyone for joining the session and submitting your questions. I think we knew we had an engaged developer community, and we knew we were going to get people here to ask questions, but I don't think we thought we would get as many questions as came in, and covering a wide spectrum of topics. So genuinely, we really appreciate the engagement, and you asking us the questions, letting us give you the answers, but also giving us some feedback for where we could head in the future. So with that, I am going to wrap up this Ask Me Anything session. If the panel, you just want to give a goodbye and thank you again, and we'll see you all at the next build session.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for all the questions.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.